Backyard Green Films is proud to present this episode of Agri-Culture with your host, Alara Bowman. Alara and her husband Rick travel throughout the land in their teardrop trailer that they have nicknamed Maggie, bringing you stories about their travels and the people they meet. They visit farmers, ranchers, and just about anyone who loves putting their hands in the dirt or their feet in stirrups. For the past 3 years, they have been filming a documentary about heritage breed animals entitled The Holstein Dilemma, Heritage Breeds, and the Need for Biodiversity. In those travels, they have gotten to meet some very interesting people. Here's one of those interviews.
Hi, this is Alara, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm a California girl, born and raised. Not only California, but in the city of San Diego. It's pretty much the quintessential place that people associate with mellow beaches, relaxed surfing, lots of sun, and thermometers that hang around the 70-degree mark a lot. And though the locals don't necessarily do the relax on the beach thing all the time, the rest of that is pretty much true for many people who either live or visit this place. We're a typical Mediterranean climate with a little bit of coastal and desert thrown in. We used to say that the weather guy or gal has the easiest job in town, 72 and sunny. So all of that is lovely, and it's easy to live in, and I'm grateful for it. But to be honest, I actually love a bit of weather. Every year in my sunny town, I anxiously await the day when the fire danger drops out of the hazard level, and when the temperature comes down enough to justify a fire in the fireplace. I love rain and snow and a little bit of wind, and those are things that are scarce in this neck of the woods. My parents and grandparents began from parts much colder than here, so maybe the fact that a fire in the fireplace was associated with comfort and getting dry comes from them. Fall colors are one of the other things that we don't usually get a lot of in California. If you hit Utah, Colorado, and other areas of the Southwest, you'll have gorgeous leaves that rival the East Coast in all its splendor, but not here in San Diego. So when we visited New York this last October, I was in heaven. That's usually a great time of year for leaf peeping in the northeastern part of the U.S., but during our visit we managed to hit it just right to see the changing of the leaves. We had trees that were turning bright red and yellow, and leaves were crunching underfoot as they fell on the ground. Everyone was decorating for fall. The temps were in the 50s and 60s during the day, with a little dip into the 40s and somewhat lower when the sun went down. We had some rain, too, and a smaller storm, so nature managed to put on a show altogether for our visit. It was a welcome change for us California people, as when we left it was in the high 80s and even the 90s at home. But one of the absolute best things about being back east for a California girl is that I get to wear my wool sweaters. Now, even though I lived my whole life in California, my folks were both from the cold weather, so I think somehow maybe an appreciation for good woolens comes through your genes somehow. My mother and my grandmother were both knitters, and rather good ones too. Our Christmas presents from my grandmother every year were handmade and came in the form of knitted hats and mittens and scarves and sweaters or blankets. That's a pretty impressive thing when you think of the fact that she had 5 grandkids. It's nearly impossible to put on something woolen without thinking of my grandmother in her chair with her knitting needles in hand. I have to admit that when I was younger, I was not smart enough to sit down with my mom and grandma to learn more than a basic knit-purl thing when they tried to teach me how to knit. I found that the difficult part for me was not so much in learning the basic stitches, the knit and purl thing. It was that part where you've been zooming along like a production line and then stop because you've hit the end of the row and then have to turn around. You also have to periodically pick up a dropped stitch when the dog bumps your elbow, or you have to get up to go to the bathroom, but forget to stabilize the needles enough and come back to this big gap where you had a tidy-looking thing before you left. And then there's the higher math that comes in if you want to do anything more than make a pot holder. And then even more higher math when you have to adjust a pattern to somewhat of a different size, and so on. You get the point. In any case, it was too much for my feeble attention span and my 10 and 12 and 14-year-old brain, but I had exposure to it nonetheless. But not everyone was lucky enough to have a knitter or a seamstress in their life, so they don't really understand the sheer amount of time it takes to construct a handmade item. A sweater, for instance. First, you pick a pattern. Then you pick the person you're willing to dedicate weeks and weeks of your life to. Then you begin to measure the person you're knitting for, which seems like it should be simple but gets complicated in a hurry. Okay, I have to admit, I'm kind of lost in this area, so I hit the internet to get the steps down on this part. The first site I hit was lionbrand.com, where they have a measuring list. Here goes. You measure the widest part of the chest, then the neck. If you want to have a different neckline on your pattern, you do some math on that section. Then you measure what's called the raglan, which I'm told is that part from your shoulder seam by the collar to the side seam at the underarm. Then you do some higher math, depending on where it meets the neck part and how much you adjusted that in the previous step. Then you do the shoulder down to the armpit to figure out the armhole depth. Then there's the body length, and that part's also going to require math, because if you want to do a crop length sweater or a tunic length sweater or somewhere in between, you'll have to adjust the pattern for that. More math. The next few measurements seem to be related to the previous step, but you have to do them individually and then multiply by pi, divide by the square root, and add 367. Okay, I made up that step, but it seems like that's the case for my brain at this point. So then you measure the natural waist at the navel, the back, neck to waist, the cross back, shoulder to shoulder, the lower hip. Since all of those are kind of in the same piece but dependent upon the previous pieces, I'm assuming this is where you do algebra or something higher than that. And then there's the sleeve length, the back of the middle of the neck to the cuff at the wrist, the upper arm length and circumference, the wrist, and the elbow. And finally, you're done. Whew. Not. You've just started. That's just the measuring part. Now you get to pick a pattern for the type of sweater you're going to knit. If you're a quick shopper and you aren't fussy, then maybe that's the easiest part for you. For me, with a hand-knit sweater, not so much. This is probably the longest part. When you've picked the pattern, then you do all of the above math to figure out just how many stitches you need to add or subtract for all of those parts just to make the thing fit for the particular person you're making it for, including if you think the person might gain or lose a few pounds over the next year or so. Now you choose the yarn. I won't subject you to the 37 hours it will take to describe the different yarns and yarn blends that are available, but I will say that different animals like sheep, goats, llamas, yaks, and rabbits all have different characteristics to the fiber they produce, with vastly different textures and colors and durability. Breeds are different, even within the same species. One animal, like a sheep, can have vastly different types of wool depending on what breed it might be. Navajo churro sheep wool might be great for making a rug, but it might feel more like Brillo against the skin. Angora wool from a rabbit might be great for a really soft scarf, but terrible if you want a sturdy coat. And the part of the animal from which you get the fiber makes a difference too. If you're talking about taking fiber from a yak, the stuff you get really close to their skin is really, really soft and fine. But the stuff on the outside might be the thing you want to use to make your tent, and the middle section of the hair fiber is best for ropes. The same holds true for many other animals. So needless to say, the yarn part can be one fiber to do one thing, like be super soft for a camisole, but not too strong. Or super strong for a tarp, but it doesn't need to be soft. Or a mix of both, in case you want a sweater that you can wear to fill up the water trough every day, that will last more than 2 winters, but that's not like steel wool against your skin. Can you imagine how many different yarn mixes there are out there? And colors? And you have to pick one, because you're now going to invest hundreds of dollars in yarn and weeks of time in knitting. And all that measuring, of course. And hard work and complex math into what is destined to become your favorite sweater, if you do it right. If you're doing all of that for someone not yourself, the person who's getting this sweater had better be the Christ child come to life again, in my opinion, because I'm tired and the knitting part hasn't even started yet. So what does it take to put a hand-sewn sweater together? I can only tell you what I've heard from different knitters and from my research, but so far, this is what seems to be the story. First, there's the cost of the yarn. The amount you'll need for a sweater is dependent on the type of fiber. Finer yarn takes more length, and some fibers are more difficult to work with than others. Is it thick, chunky yarn? That uses bigger needles and less yarn. The finer the yarn, it might be super soft, but you're going to be buying a bunch of it. That will, of course, translate to expense as well. So far as I can tell, if you want a fiber of decent quality, and if you're putting this much work into it, I'd think that'd be a given, you're looking at $150 to $250 of fiber before you even start the project. The biggest cost, though, is time. If you're a pretty fast knitter and it's a simple pattern, you can probably do a basic sweater in about 15 to 20 hours. If you're knitting a baby sweater, you might be done in less than that, but the opposite applies as well. If you're knitting a sweater for your dad and he's a big guy, you'll be at it for quite a bit longer than the average time. That's not necessarily putting the pieces together, that's just the big parts. When you do put it together, you usually hand sew it at the seams. And you also do things like edges, trimming, buttons, and all that stuff. That can take a whole day extra. But with those final touches, finally, you're done. I've looked at the price tag on hand-knitted sweaters before, and I've said to myself, holy cow, they want what for that? But I have to remind myself that what they're asking for is a living wage for that sweater. And by my calculation, if they're asking $300 for the sweater, the knitter is actually making at most $6.50 an hour. Quite a bit less if the store takes a decent cut. I'm just saying it's something to think about. I had two wonderful people in my life, my mom and my grandma, that did all of that measuring and planning and purchasing and calculating, and hour after hour of handwork in order to make me items of clothing that are more than just clothing. It's like all of that love and all of those hours of care are woven into the threads of the garment itself. And I'm wrapped in that every time I put it on, regardless of whether or not they're still with me. That's a priceless thing. If you've ever had something made for you, you know just what I mean. I urge you to go to Wing and a Prayer Farm's website and check out the site for yourself, especially if you'd like to see the Valais black-nosed sheep Tammy mentions. That breed is on our list of heritage breed animals, of course, as it dates back to the 15th century. And yes, it does look like the world's cutest stuffed animal posing for a heavy metal band's album cover. Please enjoy our talk with shepherd, farmer, knitter, blogger, fiber artisan, innkeeper, and just plain accomplished person, Tammy White of Wing and a Prayer Farm. Hi, so introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I'm Tammy White, and I have Wing and a Prayer Farm. I'm from Shaftesbury, Vermont. It's in the tri-state area of New England near Massachusetts and New Hampshire, or rather Massachusetts and New York and Vermont.
You're in the pretty area then.
It's very pretty. We call it the Shires.
The Shire
Yeah.
is probably very applicable.
I know,
And then you have all
romantic.
those sheep to go with the Shires.
Yeah.
What kind of sheep do you have?
I have Shetland, which I started with, Cotswold, Wensleydales, Dorsets, Teeswaters, Valais Blacknose, first generation, Cormos and Merinos. Yeah, the 8 breeds of sheep.
Holy
Yes.
cow. So you're just the United Kingdom
I know, I didn't get that memo on that you were supposed to have one breed or whatnot, but I also have other fiber animals.
So do you have 1 or 2 of each, or do you have 5 or 6 of each, or how does that work?
The Shetlands, I have a passel. It's an embarrassing thing when shepherds don't know the exact count, but I have approximately 10 Shetlands maybe, and approximately 10 Cormos, and I don't exactly know how many Merinos I have. I have colored Merinos. My Cotswold count is about to go up because I'm about to adopt a couple more, so I have 4 Cotswolds, I have 3 Teeswaters, 2 Wensleydales. Actually, I'm not counting, so I have 2 Polled Dorsets. If I forgot anybody, I probably have, like you said, a couple or something. The bigger numbers are, and I have 4 Valais Blacknose, first generation. Yeah, mostly I started with Shetlands, so I always imagine my Shetland numbers are the highest, but I also sell a lot of Shetlands. People want to buy them from me versus the other breeds.
Okay, now why did you say first generation on the black nose? What makes the difference there?
The Valais Blacknose breed is new to the U.S., and so we're only able to bring the semen in through frozen straws from the UK, New Zealand. They are originated in Switzerland. So we are doing a breed up program. So we have a foundation ewe. In my case, I have 2 tease waters that I had artificially inseminated with the semen. So when they had their lambs this spring, it was the first generation. So F1 is what we call them. So they're 50% tease water and 50% Valais black nose. And they truly have all the markings and beginnings of that Valais black nose breed. So they're going to be excellent for breed up. So I'm in the throes now of getting ready to inseminate for the next generation. So next year I will have F2s. And so there'll be 75% Valais black nose and 25% tease water until I get to nearly 100% in 4 to 5 years.
Well, you just gave me a new podcast topic because that sounds interesting, but I hadn't really heard of the breed up part of that. So in terms of the importation, are they really thinking that they need obviously maybe scrapie or some other or some other disease is the issue why you might not be able to import, I'm assuming, or is it breed specific for a reason?
No, it would be biosecurity would be huge. That's mostly why we're not able to receive embryos or live animals over that get shipped. So that's why we import semen, and so. It's the safest way to bring a new breed in. But we only got approved to be able to do that. They were only just gave the U.S. the okay to import the semen in 2016, in 2017. So the first lambs were on the ground in 2017, and Joy and Martin Daly, who are in Oregon, had them as part of their breed up program. So I bought my semen and my foundation ewes from them. Mine animals had to get shipped across the U.S. to come to my farm, and they had their lambs there. It sounds a little complicated, but it's not too complicated.
Well, it is. You just have to track it. I'm assuming you keep very careful records, and we've met them. I'm assuming that is one of the things that they do because they seem to be very careful with that.
Yeah, that is what they do. Yeah, and they're very good at it. And that was actually what led me to them. Was if I was going to do all of this, I kind of wanted to make sure that I did everything the right way, because I really believe in bringing this breed to the U.S. And to start right, So it's going to be taking me a few years, but I want to get it right, and I want my animals to represent in the U.S. the strongest and healthiest, best Valais black-nosed sheep that there could be. Because the hope is in 10 and 15 and 20 years, we see the Valais black-nosed dotting the pastures in the same way we see other breeds. I think that we all deserve that. They're very beautiful animals, sweetly tempered, have gorgeous fiber.
Now you would know because you have all of the rest of these other breeds of sheep, and you're non-specific to one breed, which is a great thing because you have a great number of characteristics that you can identify and say, I like that one, whether that be husbandry or behavior or fiber or marketability. You have a good feel for that. Can you tell us how the breeds that you've chosen are a little different, each one of them?
Yeah, so I organize them by category of wool types. So I have long wools like the Teeswaters, the Wensleydales, the Cotswolds. And now I consider my Valais black nose the long wools. They're in that group of wool quality. And then our classing. And then I have the fine wools, which are the Cormos and the Merinos. The Shetlands have that dual coat. So they have a fine, soft, downy undercoat, a little bit of guard hair, keeping their fiber clean all the time. They're like the easy peasies. The fine wools I have to coat to protect the integrity of their fiber. The long wools I find to be very easy as far as fiber, keeping the integrity of their fiber in my climate. And so I look for not just the best fiber quality to breed up, but I'm all about a healthy foundation animal with good resistance. So important, especially with climate change and all of that. We have to really think about going forward with a healthy, foundation. And then also, so not just fiber quality, but temperament is really important to me because as a single woman farmer, I need to be able to handle these animals, do everything I need to. And if I'm going to sell them to other farms, the other farms need to be able to handle them well and take care of them because we don't have a lot of small ruminant veterinary care, so we end up doing a lot for ourselves. So I would say it's like kind of like it's a basket full of criteria that make me think about which animal we should breed up with.
That's one thing that many people don't realize, and that we learned early on, is that culling occurs, whether that be through not breeding or
Selling or
harvesting or whatever you may
Right.
have. That's for temperament as much as for the rest of your characteristics, because you want an animal that really can be handled, and that seems to be an old time thing, because you wanted your kids to be able to go out and take care of the sheep. But it's also a current thing, because of people maybe want a little more independence. I don't want to have 15 people to take care of my farm.
No, right.
Yeah.
And also because the temperament of your sheep affects the temperament of the flock. So if you have a sheep that's very stressed for whatever reasons, there are all the reasons that come into it for the same reason we might be stressed: genetics or environment, etc., health issues. It affects the temperament of your entire flock. And a stressed flock is going to be less hardy as far as producing a good fiber, because stress creates a break in the fiber. And, it's going to affect their nutrition or the way they digest or whatever. There's just, so if you're a settled animal, then, your flock mates will be settled, hopefully, too. And if you're not settled for whatever the reasons are, then you need to be assisted in settling in some way, or maybe purposed in a different way. And I usually call for breeding. Like, I'm not going to breed and unsettle the stressed animal or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to leave my farm. But it means maybe more of an investment from me to help them to get to a point where they're a happier animal. And not everybody's going to do that, take that time, but in my instance, I'm able to, and I prefer to try to do that.
Yeah. Now, you talk about the changes with weather and whatnot. We talked to Jerry and Heather, and they were mentioning the rain and how that's really impacted their nutrition.
I know.
And that you have, they had 18 months of rain basically in the Pennsylvania area, I think she was saying.
Yeah.
And so that really impacts the fiber quality, because that's a long-term issue. Do you find that some of your sheep in one breed handle the vagaries of weather better than others? And I mean in terms of a long-term pattern that breed is not used to.
Yeah. Okay, so the Shetlands are very adaptable. They're very acclimated to the Northeast, and wind, rain, snow, whatever. I don't find that they are ever stressed by the weather. None of the animals enjoy the heat of summer, right? When we have a week or two of high temperatures in the summer, which we do in Vermont, everybody is finding shade and just staying put. The fine wools, I would say, are the least resistant to wet, humid, heat, that sort of weather. And so maybe they're not the best pick for my farm in the Northeast. I like what they bring to my fiber, though. I like what they bring to my yarns, and I like keeping them. They're lovely, tempered animals. Big, my Peter Pan, who's a Cormo, it's like hugging a, Posturepedic mattress. So I value him for all these reasons, but I don't think that fine wool farming in the Northeast is very easy. I have long wools that their fiber is fine in my weather. I'm not having the same amount of rain as they're having in the middle Atlantic states, like in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I'm having wetter weather, like this year we had an intense amount of rain in the spring, then we had a dry spell in the summer, like for August or whatever. But because overall I have more, a less severe sort of climate, I think that the breeds are working out all right. Winter is harsher where I am than it is in the Mid-Atlantic. Where
even in the Shire.
Yeah, even in the Shire. Even in the Shire. But my sheep love that. They are fine with that. And I do have a structure for them to get out of the severest weather. But gosh, there are many days in the summer when we're all just too bloody hot. And I'm saying to myself, is anybody, am I going to get cursed if I wish for winter today? Because winter is easy, no parasites. The animals are so happy. It's harder on me as a farmer, for sure, but my animals are happier, makes me happier.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I have chickens, and I have to say the summer with the pests, especially in the last couple of years, is just a fight.
Yeah.
It's a fight.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, everybody's going through it. And
right.
I'm not even a farmer. It's not my livelihood, so I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk to you about is, well, what's in this booth. You say you're a shepherd, and yet, boy, this is gorgeous. This is like being in a store. Well, it is a store.
Yeah, thank
but
you.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. So I'm also like a chef in the kitchen with all this fiber. And it all started because I had brought my mohair from my goats, I have Angora goats, into the mill. I'm really lucky that I'm like an hour or two from 3 different mills where I live in Vermont.
Now that's unusual.
It
too,
is. And so I know all my mills and I drive to them directly. And so I'm able to bring my fiber in and talk to the mill owner about what I've got and what I'm going to make. I brought my mohair in, and the mill owner said to me, well, Tammy, you got to get yourself some cormo to go with this mohair. And I said, oh. So I started actively seeking out some cormo sheep, and so, which, I could blend with my mohair. I started thinking about what can I put with these different fibers. The Shetland I will always spin just, mostly I just spin a straight Shetland. And so I started making recipes. Well, if I blend this and that. So I never buy, I don't need to buy the fiber because I have the animals there. I like it to come from my farm. So I'll put the mohair in with the cormo, but with the long wool. And so a long wool can sometimes, some long wools can be considered a coarser wool, but when you add a little mohair and a little fine wool and blend it together, you get kind of the best of everything. That's what this yarn is. It's called Thelma and Louise. Yeah. And it's got this halo from the mohair, but it's got the strength of the long wool. It's got the fine and warmth of the fine wool in it. And
so this is a super interesting concept that really feeds into our documentary that we're doing, the Heritage Breed documentary. If you have those original materials, you can always mix them depending on what you want. It's like a cake is the example I would use. You can, if you want a little sweeter cake, you can put a little more sugar in it. If you want a little fluffier cake, you might put more eggs. But if you mix everything in the cake and you just stick it in one pile, you can't ever have a different kind of cake. So you are doing the same exact thing, but you must have the different breed characteristics of fibers in order to be able to say, I want that a little bit stronger, I want that a little softer, correct?
Right.
Because otherwise you can throw them all in the same breeding pen and it's not going to make necessarily the same thing as what you're wearing.
Right. But it's probably going to make really strong sheep because crosses tend to be a stronger sheep. But I take these different fibers and put them together, usually based on the length of the fiber, the staple length, that they would be matched up so that the mill can do something with that and make a nice yarn for you. So I go a lot with what the mill advises. So sometimes I do a straight run, like I said, on the Shetland or on my cormo yarn. I love a nice, solid 100% cormo yarn.
Do you have a 100% cormo somewhere in here?
Yeah, let me grab a cormo sample here. Actually, excuse me. So this is 100% cormo, and so you can feel the bounce and the squish and all of the things we talk about. And it doesn't have the drape that the mohair. So this shawl has mohair in it, which offers some drape, and the long wool that offers drape. And this makes something that's a little, holds the structure a little more like this cardigan that I'm wearing. And the other thing that I do is I dye everything naturally. So this was dyed with coreopsis that I grow on my garden.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, so I raise all my own dye goods and do all my own dyeing on the farm.
In your spare time from the sheep and the...
Yeah. So I know it sounds fabricated, but it's for real that everything in my booth is from my farm. The color and the fiber.
You have an intimate knowledge of it and how it works.
And everyone has a name. And I know it sounds romantic to some people, and I don't mean to, and I don't intend it to be sounding like whimsical and romantic. It is just the way I am, and it's the way I am able to be energetic about what I do, which is hard work. So.
There's a difference between romance for the sake of romance and meaning, and applying meaning to something. And I think it's really tough to keep meaning in the long run unless you really identify with it.
Right.
But for the reasons of that, I know what the character of that is, and I accept. For all the benefits and all the goods and bads in it, I know what that is, and so it has more meaning for that.
And then from that you can do anything, right? If you need to.
Yes. So the dyes and the wools, everything comes from your farm as much as possible?
Nearly everything. I'll point out something that doesn't okay, so Danny is one of the F1s, the Valais black-nosed F1s, and so we have lots of good friends of the farm. So friend Miranda is an artist, and she did block prints, and so we could offer Danny in a block print at this festival, right? So because not everybody is a knitter, right? But you still love maybe the animals.
I'm not, but I still have to touch all this fabric. Doesn't mean I'm going to,
Yeah,
so get my husband to buy me a sweater later on, but
Yeah, and it will be a sweater that will last and last and last. So whenever, like I will say about my hand knits, that they last forever. And I might add, at this point, if you don't mind, I might add that, like, I am a very, very, very slow knitter. And even though I do all of these other things with speed and alacrity, I cannot knit without falling asleep.
You think there's a reason for that? You think it's comforting to you or soothing?
I mean, I love it,
peaceful?
but when I sit down, I am so bloody tired. And so I'm just out. And I mean I'm out. And so I can't link together enough stitches to make very quick progress. So I have found, and it took me a while because I was a little frustrated because I needed to have samples of the beautiful yarns that we make so that when I come to a festival such as this, that I could show folks that, like, this is what it looks like, knit up or whatever. But there are knitters out there that love knitting.
I'm so glad that you kind of segued into this because part of the joy of coming here to this event is to see everybody walking around in their sweaters. It is like a fashion show, but it's a fashion show that in some ways they say, I made this. And it's everybody looking at everybody else's sweaters and saying, oh my gosh, that's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
So it's breed specific, it's yarn specific, but it's really skill specific. And for someone like me, I love the sweater. It's beautiful. Where do I get that? There's not really a lot of that here.
Right. No, because we're selling a supply.
Okay. So tell me about your option. I was very excited about that.
So we're selling a supply, which means that if you're not a knitter but you want to hand knit, then what you need to do is be hooked up with a knitter, right?
Yes.
And it's a hard work for a knitter, so you have to expect to pay a little more. But I do know, and I think every fiber farm owner knows knitters that will be happily employed because they love knitting to take your supply, whatever you choose, and create something for you and work with you. And so I have customers that are not knitters and they want something made in something from our farm, and we reach out to the people we know that love to knit and will knit for a fee because obviously they need to be compensated, and then we let them work with them from there. And I've known many a happy marriage that way. So it's turned out that they're it's not like knitters are in a factory waiting for work to come their way. You just kind of have to be networked into the knitters that will do that. And
handwork is an amazingly complex thing, and it's an amazingly time-consuming thing.
Yeah.
And in a way, you're in. At least to me, and again, I don't want to be the romantic one here, but there is a world of emotion that goes into knitting, at least in my personal experience. My mother would knit, my grandmother would knit, and you almost can feel that synergy of an outfit that has had a garment that has had that much attention paid to it, and that much thought going on in the background while the person is making it. It almost threads itself into the garment itself in a way. So all of this, you're going to have somebody else knit for you, seems like a fantastic thing. Is it difficult for somebody, do you think, that knits like that to give up that garment? Or is it just, I love to knit? There are people who love to knit. And I think it's good. Like we never talk about this, but because a person who doesn't know how to knit might be sort of in, a little bit intimidated by coming to a place like this, right? But I think that as a farmer and as a supplier, I think it is important for us to share that. Knitters do come and visit and squish our wool and all of that. And folks who are interested in hand knits and in wool do come and squish our wool and let us help you facilitate that you could also do this. Either encourage you to find a yarn store that offers knitting lessons, right? Or library groups or whatever, or go online because it's out there, maybe you just need to start and learn how to make that first little loop and that first, stitch those first few stitches. Maybe you're hooked after that. Or maybe you just need your hand held more. Or maybe you're like, no, I really don't think I'm going to do this.
then let us help you try to find somebody who can help you have a garment out of wool from a farm,
Okay, so now you do this. Now you have a website, you have a thriving business, and a following, and all the rest of that. Is that part of one of the things that you offer?
I offer myself to help anybody with their questions. So I always say, feel free to email me,
Yes,
and I'll do my best. So I'll facilitate as well as I can. So if you're a person that emails me and you're interested in learning about, I would like to buy some yarn from you, but I don't knit, then I'm going to help you find somebody who can knit for you and with you, and I'm going to help you find a connection.
Okay, so they come to you, they send you an email, they said this is what I want, and you answer them and you make that connection, or what is the easiest way to do that?
No, that's what I do.
Okay, wonderful. What a fantastic thing.
I know. Well, it shouldn't be that you can't have something if like that you can't have a hand knit if you don't know how to.
Yeah. So please tell me again the name of your website, and if people want to contact you, what they should do.
Okay. We have a website called wingandaprayerfarm.com. It's all one word. And if a person wants to find out about workshops or events, because I host a lot of things like learning how to naturally dye, etc., soap making, pie baking, all of these things, go to my website and check out the events. Tells you where I am, what I'm doing, tells you more about the farm and collaborations, etc. And send me an email if you have questions, hello@wingandaprayerfarm.com. Follow me on Instagram, where I share a lot about the farm all of the time, and on Facebook and Twitter. Okay, I will do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
you're welcome.
If you liked our podcast, please subscribe. This is how we keep going. And please tell your friends to join us. Please feel free to post any questions or comments that you might have to our social media sites. Our Twitter feed is @BackyardGreenFilms, spelled BKYRDGREENFILMS. Our Instagram is @BackyardGreenFilms, BACKYARDGREENFILMS. Our Facebook is Backyard Green Films. Our YouTube URL is youtube.com/backyardgreenfilms.
We want to thank Tammy White for taking time out of her busy schedule to speak with us today. If you'd like more information about Tammy and her farm, please visit her website at wingandaprayerfarm.com. You have been listening to Agri-Culture with your host, Alara Bowman. Please tune in for more upcoming episodes from our travels. I'm Rick Bowman, your behind-the-scenes editor. Until next time. This has been a presentation of Backyard Green Films Productions, all rights reserved, copyright 2019.